Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about authored versus avatar protagonists. Before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we talk about games, and I feel like this is like a deeply old school episode, right? Like this is like a really real kind of throwback to a lot of the early episodes that we did. This idea, well, it's yours, so why don't you frame it?
Yeah, so basically, to set the frame, Marathon is coming out in 4 or 5 weeks at this point, and one of the changes they have made since the initial announcement was supposed to come out in September was that the runners, like the actual characters, were authored characters in this parlance, which were they had their own personalities and they had their own stories that maybe you would have explored, like you would have gone through their storyline in the extraction shooter. In the new iteration, they don't have names anymore, like the names of the shells are more like classes. Like I think it used to be Ghost and now it's Thief, something like that, right? Like the security guard is named Destroyer. It's stuff like that, and so that kicked up a minor discussion online about these authored protagonists versus avatar protagonists. The avatar protagonist being a more blank slate character, and I thought it would be an interesting thing to explore because on the one end you have something like the Dovahkiin, which is fairly blank state, maybe not as blank slate as you could be, maybe like Baldur's Gate. The protagonist is even more blank slate because the Dovahkiin at least gets a little bit of characterization. And then you can go up the line. I think a good midpoint ish would be something like Commander Shepard, who has a defined personality and has a bunch of different, or it has a couple different routes you can take. But like you are free to move within those and project your thoughts on them. Maybe also the protagonist of the latest Dragon Age counts here too. And then all the way at the author end, you have somebody like Nathan Drake or Kratos, who is fully authored. You have no meaningful control over the story, and all your only control is over like game inputs and like the game succeeding. And they both have their pros and cons, and we wanted to talk about that a little bit.
But the part of this that's really interesting to me is this overlap between narrative, like storytelling, kind of decision making potential, and the characters themselves, because I actually think that the true like ultimate endpoint of this is actually probably something like World of Warcraft is maybe, or even like Valheim or
Hmm.
something, or like Minecraft would actually probably be like the best answer for this, which is kind of a game that is, Minecraft is so narrativeless that the only narrative that is possible is through a fully avatared protagonist setting out to kind of like set their own set of circumstances to build a castle and then, go into the nether and get blaze rods and all of that other kind of stuff, right? Like there is there's truly zero personality there besides what you project onto the character, including a complete ability to control the visual expression of the character. So I would actually say that Minecraft is the most avatared that you could possibly get out of a protagonist. But there's this piece on the narrative side where, you know, when you cross that far away from a traditional storytelling structure, do you lose a protagonist entirely and kind of disqualify it? So, for instance, the Dovahkiin, or the Dovahkiin, or is a good example. I was also going to say, your character in World of Warcraft, right? These are characters who are still existing in traditional narratives, where there are villains, there's an antagonist, there are goals and things that you're kind of like, contending with, and all of the rest of that sort of thing. And Minecraft really doesn't have any of that sort of stuff. And so do you sort of disqualify it from even entering onto the scale because the lack of a true narrative, even though it has 100% of the decision-making capability that you're kind of looking for as a metric to define this spectrum, do you lose your ability to talk about that because it just doesn't even have a narrative in the first place to create an apparatus for decision making?
Yeah, no, that's interesting because like I think you're onto something, but I also think that like part of Minecraft and part of these games that have like that are very loose are like the stories you tell yourself about the experience, right? Like the stuff that you project onto the character. And I
Mhm.
think Minecraft kind of gets very close to that knife's edge because like there's a lot of kind of like the creative mode version of Minecraft is like is pure kind of like playing with Legos in a sandbox, right? Um,
Mhm.
which has its own kind of which really lacks any structure. But I think the kind of survival mode you can at least like pull a narrative out of it by writing it yourself, kind of, right? Um, and I think this is interesting. This is interesting to me too because you bring up World of Warcraft, and that is interesting to me because there is a defined story and a defined narrative, and your character plays a role in it. But like, it is kind of like both halves of this equation, right? Like, you have a very set role that you cannot change. Um, in the story, right? Like you don't make choices, you just kind of like sail along for the events, and you really don't exercise any kind of agency over the story, much like a fully authored character. Um, and everything, but it wants to be an avatar character, and so all characterization of your character is something that you pour into it purely from outside the game. Like maybe you could make an argument around like you know factions that you choose and mogs that you choose, but that's all very very incidental, right?
Yeah. I also have a weird thing with World of Warcraft because I actually think the protagonist of World of Warcraft isn't the player character in a traditional sense. The
Sure.
protagonist of World of Warcraft is Anduin or is Illyria or it's kind of you are almost always kind of like following a set of characters and in kind of your party or the just like the whatever, and they're the ones who are really exerting the kind of power that you expect over a narrative onto onto the story. And so maybe you could make an argument that like because you are almost always sort of the impetus for some of these things happening, but you're not actually kind of the protagonist. Uh you kind of get this like Mad Max Fury Road thing. Mad Max Fury Road is a story told from Max's perspective, and Max is like the central character, the POV character. His growth defines the story, for instance, right? But the protagonist is Furiosa, right? And so you have that weird disconnect kind of between the two, and there's something interesting there with World of Warcraft. And I don't really know that it's worth it to even diagnose that any further than just like, in order to make a live service game work, you have to do shit like this,
Yeah,
right?
no, I mean, because the same thing is true of the Guardian in Destiny, right? Like
Mm,
you are the pivotal character in all of these big things, but like the actual characters that are important are are hold on, I'm not gonna remember the leaders of the different factions, right? um
yeah.
Cade and um God, why can I not remember Lance Reddick's character's name? um uh, uh Basically all those.
Bruno.
Hmm?
I don't know. I have no
uh
idea.
um I can see his face, it's driving me crazy.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Um and the Guardian also similarly does not really get choices. There's like he has like one voiced line in the entire game, and that is like him getting mad when Cade gets killed, right?
Mhm.
Uh Although that may have changed in the last couple of expansions, I have not paid
Yeah,
attention.
didn't Cade come back? Isn't that one of
So
the
Cade in the
I fucking hate Destiny. I hate Destiny so much for making me ask that question.
so the in the I cannot remember the name of the expansion, but in the one where you fight the Witness, right, which is kind of like the
Mhm.
end of like the big arc that Destiny won up through 2 years ago, 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, Destiny went through. Um, the Traveler brings Cade back in kind of like a virtual form, but like he goes back, he leaves into kind of he walks off into the sunset at the conclusion of that arc, right? He returns and remerges with the Traveler, um, because it's kind of what he wants to do, right? Like he can't just it's played kind of like the right thing to do is to let him go to his rest, and it's my time's done here, right? Like I came back because it was important, um, but
But we
I'm
can't afford Nathan Fillion's contract anymore, so Yeah, I guess it's sort of fitting that we're talking about Destiny 2 because Bungie, and Marathon is sort of the basis for what we're here to kind of talk about. And they also did another version of this, which is also pretty interesting, I would say, which is Master Chief, because Master Chief is a cipher in the sense that he is a character that you can project quite a lot onto, but he is completely locked, and he's on the other end of that spectrum. He's entirely authored, right? Which I also think is sort of like an interesting kind of wrinkle to this whole sort of thing, because there's that. I think there's a tendency towards sort of, a player's narrative agency defines this spectrum, right? You either have incredibly authored characters. Maybe Lara Croft would be a really good example of this as well, that just popped into my head. You have these incredibly authored characters on the one end, which have very little game or narrative agency. You're just kind of along for the ride with them, and then on the other hand you have these blank slates, right? But Master Chief is a blank slate who lives on that far end of the spectrum, because he doesn't really have a personality. He's mostly there to just kind of do the thing over and over again, and you know he's sort of picked up a legendary quietness, maybe, like
Yeah, he has some lines,
the
but he's not super opinionated, right?
yeah, exactly. Doom Guy would also maybe be an interesting
So,
corollary.
so funnily enough, a person who fits this exactly is the security officer from the original Marathon games, who has says nothing, has no personality. The characters in that game are the AIs, and the alien species, right? Durandal, Dr. Strauss. I cannot. I cannot remember the names of the other AIs, but they are the characters. You are just kind of like the blank, well, kind of like the Doom Guy or like the Master Chief, right? Um,
Uh,
which is maybe why they decided to people pushed back hard against kind of the hero shooter feelingness of Marathon, and the only thing they've really changed about it is the personality aspect, right? Like the characters all have roughly the same powers, right? Like they've been tweaked, but it's not they got rid of the fact that some shells can do some things and some shells can not do things, but they took away that kind of personality, that Overwatchness, which is I think interesting because hero shooters are kind of the first attempt, I think, to bring in a authored character with personality into a a shooter environment, a multiplayer environment, right? I was supposed to say multiplayer, but fighting game characters all have their own story personality. They don't really matter to the game to the gameplay, right? Nobody cares that Ken's deforced in Street Fighter 5 or whatever, right? While you're playing the game, but it is part of the character's lore and things that people roughly do care about, right? Akuma being friends with I forget who he's friends. Kuma's friends with one of the girl characters in a way that's people think is fun, but that's not actually important to the gameplay. But the same thing happens in a hero shooter, right? Mercy and Reinhardt have stories, right? They have personalities, they have authored intent to them, but that doesn't matter basically at all to the actual gameplay. I think this started probably with Team Fortress 2, where they started basically without personality, just kind of some funny lines, and it just kind of got imported. They slowly built up characters or personalities for these characters. Do you have a sense of why people it feels like people are mad at hero shooters now? Do you have a sense for why that is?
I think interesting. So I have a very specific vector for this, which is that I know a lot of Overwatch lore. I don't play all that much Overwatch, but I don't know. The lore is the interesting part. Overwatch and League of Legends really sort of defined this thing where it was kind of you can make lore where the gameplay matches themselves aren't diegetic, essentially, right? One of the things they famously did for League of Legends was they got rid of the Summoner's Rift, sort of there was that whole apparatus that was about,
Yeah,
oh, the matches are played on Summoner's Rift to resolve conflicts, and there are different champions, and this is all what it is. It was a very one-to-one explanation of what is happening in the game of League of Legends. They just abandoned all of that, and they abandoned all of that after Overwatch kind of proved that you didn't really need it, right? What I think happens is, when you're good at this thing, and Blizzard and Riot were very good at this thing, people identified with the characters in a way that was pretty like deep and I would say actually kind of complex, right? Like, this is the stupidest example, but for the last 13 years, my background on my desktop has been Yasuo because I really loved Yasuo and Samurai and all of those things. It creates a bunch of touch points for me to sort of like latch on to, right? Um that happens entirely outside of any narrative kind of constraints. In fact, kind of my annoyance with League of Legends and the lore that I care about and all of the rest of that sort of stuff is I felt like I was sort of invested in League of Legends lore and it wasn't doing anything interesting or fun or unique, right? I was just kind of learning about a new champion every couple of weeks, and I was then going, okay, well then, all right, what's next, right? The story never moves anywhere, never progresses, right? It just, the world keeps expanding. Here's a new guy, here's a new guy, here's a new guy kind of thing, right? I have a lot of problems with League of Legends lore for a million different angles, to be honest with you. The version of this that I think people like and that does well when it comes to like League of Legends and Overwatch is about allowing people to have a certain amount of texture for like the characters that they want to play in a way that we've talked about before, which is like, nobody would ever play a video game where the abilities are all ability 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? With playing class B and I'm playing race 9. Like you need texture in order to create a fantasy that somebody wants to step into, and the characters themselves are essentially creating that fantasy, those sorts of in those sorts of games, but they're completely unrelated to sort of the nature of the game state itself. The thing that I think Marathon is doing is recognizing that they have actually kind of defined quite a lot about the state of the game, and what you're doing in it, and therefore you no longer really need to have characters support that process, right? If you're going to make the actual literal truth of the game, they're on a moon, right? Is what it
um
is. You're going to the moon.
no, Tau Ceti 4. It's a planet.
Okay.
The marathon, the ship was is the hollowed out is a hollowed out moon. Deimos, I think. It's like a moon
Okay.
around Mars. They hollow out and they turn into a ship that they send off into space. That is the marathon.
Okay.
And um one of the first post launch map that will need to be unlocked by the communities, I believe, still the status of it is on the marathon, but most of the maps are on Tau Ceti 4.
Okay. So they have created the same thing that Arc Raiders has, which is that there's this whole sort of narrative framing around you are a guy who is going into this place to, I guess, loot, you know, whatever is on Tau Ceti for the purposes of this extraction shooter. In the same way that for Arc Raiders, you are going up to the surface to do sort of that same thing. And that is a one-to-one sort of thing. So this is what I would say Overwatch and League of Legends have left behind. We have learned we no longer need to do this. And so therefore you kind of don't need to do the hero shooter side of it either. The one piece of this that is a good caveat to kind of the theorem that I'm putting forward, the thesis, would be Apex Legends, which is also kind of a hero shooter, but I really don't know the lore of Apex Legends at all, so I couldn't really comment.
Yeah, I mean, Apex Legends, the lore is complicated because it's set in the same world as Titanfall, and people are mad about there not being a Titanfall 3 for totally kind of like incidental reasons, right? Um, and so that gets mixed up with like, non kind of like, uh, uh, non quality based versions of it, right? It's like, kind of like audience wish casting versions. But I think you've got something. I think specifically for Marathon, you've got something there. Marathon has always been about the setting and kind of like the AI as characters, right? Like the kind of like more the game changer characters. Like it's similar to World of Warcraft, right? Like the narrative of World of Warcraft is about Anduin and you know, Foot Lady Zaratath, right? You got that name right? Yeah.
What lady Zalatath, you mean?
Yeah, Zaratath. Yeah, there we go. Uh, it's always been about their stories playing out where you're kind of like the agent, like, you know, the kind of like you're the gun that gets fired, right? Like, and you make things happen, but you know, you're not actually like, you know, making any of the decisions, right? In the same way that, like, you know, the freaking you know, the generals didn't hit the beach on D-Day, but they're responsible for it, right? Like, they're the ones that get remembered for it, not the, you know, not the men that actually stormed the beach are not remembered individually. And I think that's kind of what your character's playing, is like a soldier. I think that's kind of the same thing here. And I guess it makes sense that that it would be distracting to talk about like the individual characters that were the shells. I'm interested to see how they go with it, right? Because they could just like kind of have pulled back that layer a little bit and still like have those story beats, like who was the person that the shell is based on in the game still. Like, you wouldn't actually have to like change that much, just like kind of go with the fiction that you're kind of assuming their body. um but you also kind of don't need that for its story to work. And I think one of Marathon's angles in the shooter is supposed to be more story heavy, right? It's supposed to have a little bit more to do than Arc Raiders, which is, I wouldn't say flimsy, but it's kind of like, you know, oh, there was stuff that happened in the first wave, and this is the second wave, and you're the new guard, right? And you get little bits and pieces, but like it's not, you know, it's not really anything. Whereas I think Marathon wants it to be, in typical Bungie fashion, they want it to be deep and rich, and, you know, for the obsessives who care, you know, people to figure out, like, you know, what all their mysterious symbols mean and whatnot. But I think it's slightly different than what I was trying to drive at, which is, it seems to me that there is at this moment a pushback against kind of at least these authored characters in hero shooters. Like, I don't think anybody's mad about, like, wouldn't be mad about like the next, you know, God of War game, but I do get the sense that like people are kind of fed up with some of this hero shooter stuff. And I don't know, maybe it's kind of like, you know, Marvel disease, and everybody's sick of people like looking at the camera and winking, and that's just kind of how these things end up playing out. But I wonder if you had any insight.
How do you feel about the characters in Deadlock? Deadlock would be a really interesting, you know, came out last year, right? You know, it's a hero
still
shooter.
Technically an alpha or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah, sure, exactly. Because I feel like I want to really challenge the notion that people are fed up with this thing, because I kind of feel like they're not, in ways that would actually be hard for me to define. But I do sort of agree with you, especially because, like, you know, like Concord or something like that, you know, is like slop that everybody hates.
High Guard.
Yeah, High Guard, which just came out and is apparently successful. I have heard, actually. Even though it had the weirdest, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know. Games like this always boggle the mind, I would say.
It seems like it's like moderately successful, but not greatly successful, right? Like, you know, like, will it be up in a year? Who knows? Like I forget if I mentioned it on the Derpies, but Super Vive is going offline this month sometime.
Depressing.
Yeah. But that is a little bit more excusable, just because it's a small team and, like, you know, their expenses with running a server. But that's not the point. Like, Deadlock, like, the characters each have personalities and like little backstories, but it's more, I would say, like League of Legends, or actually it's more like Dota than it is like League of Legends, because the only thing you get is the backstory, right? Like, you get the, like, there isn't any pretension to a larger, like there are hints of like an overarching conflict, right? Like, you know, like in the Defense of the Ancient Styles, right? There is a bare bones excuse for the thing that is happening on the screen in front of you, and each of the characters has a little bit of a backstory. But there's no like Overwatch cinematics, right? There's no like meta plot that's being advanced by, you know, Jeff Kaplan throwing a piece of red meat out to the fanboys every once in a while, right? Like, it's just kind of like, you know, self-contained. And maybe that's the thing I'm pointing at. Maybe this is, you know, like, Deadlock and Dota didn't even have the level of like, oh, and the Summoner's Rift is a proxy for, real conflicts, and there's actually a storyline somewhere in the background, and we're going to have a Netflix series, right? It's just kind of like, maybe if you looked, you could find like why Meepo is like, the Geomancer, and there's an explanation there, but it's not really like there's no one who follows Dota or Deadlock purely for the lore and doesn't play, right? Like you had for like Overwatch.
Yeah, this is true. I am that person. I follow Overwatch lore, but I don't play it, right?
And there are a lot of people that like this was, around the time that like Overwatch 1 was starting to be in decline. This is part of the conversation, right? Like there are a lot of people who actually absolutely care zero about the game, but they do care about like, the lore, right? And the
Yeah.
And kind of like the cinematics.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of it with like characters who get introduced. So for instance, when Ashe was introduced and it was like, oh, she is McCree, like McCree's partner in crime from when they were back doing the Deadlock gang or whatever. Wow, wait, did they really call Deadlock? Well, whatever. It was called the Deadlock gang, thinking about it. That is a thing that like grabs people's attention. Or for instance, at one BlizzCon they announced Mauga, who is, he's like a big tank from Talon. He's a Pacific Islander or whatever. Mauga is like a character who had been in the lore for a long time. He had shown up in a bunch of sort of like series and stuff like that. I think he was in the comics and things like that. And so him actually getting a character was sort of like a big deal. And that's the kind of thing that could drive people back to the game, right? Which is what's sort of useful, right? In the same vein, you have the thing where Senna comes out for League of Legends. Senna is Lucian's wife. You can have the thing for Yasuo and Yone, I think is Yasuo's brother, who's like an alive ghosty but not, or whatever, right? Like when you create a bunch of characters that people are connected to, you can then use those characters to re-engage them sort of long term because they are related to the things that people are already sort of invested in. But I think the trick is getting people to invest in characters in the first place, right? Like I am to a certain extent invested in the stories of McCree and Hanzo and Genji or whatever, because those are characters that I like in Overwatch. But they have new characters who show up every once in a while. Vendetta just came out. She's the Italian gladiator hero. She's been teased for a long time. And it's just sort of like, well, I don't super care because she's related to an aspect of the lore that I don't find particularly complex or interesting.
Yeah, and maybe the thing that I'm seeing is people recognizing that it's mostly just a hook rather than like a real thing, and them pushing back against that. Like the joke was that like Blizzard's in trouble. Announced that Soldier 76 is gay or whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
And so maybe that's the thing I am seeing here. That I'm pointing at. So
the part that I find so interesting is that it is narrativeless in a true, in a true sense. These are the other end of the equation that I had just sort of described. You have Master Chief on one end where he has no control over his narrative, but he is this avatar character. And on the other end, what you actually have is you have really, really, heavily sort of authored characters who are outside of the narrative, just like Minecraft Steve, right? And so it's just like it's the shaky intersection between those two pieces, because I do think that otherwise there is a really straightforward spectrum where you have Shepard, you have Lara Croft, Shepard, the Dovahkiin, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we're talking about everybody's favorite pretentious game theory term, ludonarrative dissonance, right? Like that we're like Kratos achieves pretty good ludonarrative consonance, right? Like the story does not feel so divorced from the gameplay that it's a problem, but like, or actually the story and the gameplay mesh very well, right? So it's not a problem, right? Like maybe you don't feel like you are in part of an epic story when you're killing a grunt for the 34th time, but like the big boss moments hit, right? You feel like you're doing it as part of the storyline, right? As part of the thing that Kratos needs to do to defeat the bad guy, deal with Winter, to deal with Odin, keep him from taking your son away or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny because ludonarrative dissonance was a term that was used to describe BioShock, and Nathan Drake was a fundamental example of it, where Nathan Drake is a wisecracking, roguish charmer who is also committing murder on a scale that, serial killers only dream to have that as many victims as him. And it's because the game is a fucking shooter, and so you have to shoot a bunch of bad guys, right? But like the Ludo narrative of the gameplay is about shooting hundreds and hundreds of goons and throwing grenades to blow people up is not quite in line with I'm a I don't know, whatever Nathan Drake is kind of thing, right?
Indiana Jones.
Yeah. And you obviously, like, I mean, this is like given the framing of fucking like 2009 video game Twitter, which I am deeply embarrassed to be bringing up on a podcast in 2026, but it's absolutely like the origins of where the term came from.
Yeah, and it's because like in retrospect, like I understand that, but in retrospect, I would say that that's kind of like the only reason that feels dissonant is if you look at it too hard, if that makes sense. If you, because like
It is
like you don't blink twice when Indy shoots the swordsman, right? In Raiders of the Lost Ark. And like, because it's a 1.5, 2 hour movie, that's fine. But Uncharted takes place over many hours, and you basically have to, you have to have gameplay in the middle. But that's like a very fridge moment ludonarrative dissonance. Whereas I feel like Overwatch is very like, the opposite of fridge moment, right? Like in the moment ludonarrative dissonance, where like the character is entirely divorced from the gameplay.
Yeah, I think fridge moment is a really great way to describe it. But I actually would say that Overwatch isn't an example, because Overwatch fundamentally divorces its, narrative from its gameplay, right? The gameplay of me being in Watchpoint Gibraltar as Reaper and I shoot the fuck out of Soldier 76, there is no implication from the game that is like a real thing happening sort of like inside of the diegesis of the story, right? Even if like there are these sort of like echoes of it. So I actually would say that Overwatch and League of Legends and these kinds of games that have successfully divorced themselves from kind of the diegetic implications of gameplay, they sidestep this issue entirely. But that, Nathan Drake doesn't, because the game does really insist that the things you are doing as Nathan Drake are part of the gameplay experience and tied into the story. And there's this other piece of it, which is like, I mean, and again, I guess I have to say this thing about ludonarrative dissonance, because frankly, I think it is a bad faith is kind of the term I want to use for it. It reminds me of counting the people that Batman kills in Batman vs Superman, right? Which is this thing of like, if you don't buy into the game, the state of the world, right? Where Batman, whatever, he shoots a car that is shooting at him, and the car blows up, and those people are probably dead, but you don't see their charred bodies, right? Assuming that there are charred bodies there, and that Batman is breaking his code that he doesn't kill people, which again is from like other pieces of the comics or whatever else, right? This is a thing that I would describe as bad faith, not in a way to kind of attack the argumentation, but in a way of quite literally saying that I am not going to take the story at its word that Batman didn't kill those people, right? Or the story at its sort of implication, right? It's not really at its word. It's all about how you resolve implication that's happening sort of behind the scenes. Are you going to interpret in good faith in the favor of the story, or in bad faith against the favor of the story, sort of thing, right? And this is something that we also sort of see with like suspension of disbelief, which we've talked about a million times on the podcast. I'd say all of this is part and parcel with the same thing. The ludonarrative stuff is keying into that aspect as well, right? Like a game is only ludonarratively dissonant if you are engaging with it in bad faith. You are outside of the experience such that you can't suspend your disbelief, such that you're thinking about Nathan Drake, expert munitions specialist who is mowing down all of these gazillion bad guys, and that's like taking you sort of out of the experience. And the root at the heart of all of that really is about experience, which is maybe a good sort of corollary also to the spectrum. So for instance, if I were to typify the Dovahkiin on one end, I think the Dovahkiin is very little about an intended or driven experience. It is mostly about expression. It is about allowing a character to express themselves through the avatar, right? This is the fundamentals of sort of an avatar protagonist. And on the other end of that, you have the tailored experience. So I would sort of say that when you want players to have the ability to express themselves, this is when you have avatar protagonists. When you want players to have a specific narrative experience, this is when you have authored protagonists.
I think that last part's mostly right. I think I disagree with you on the linear narrative dissonance thing, just because I actually don't think.
Oh, really?
I don't think League of Legends or Overwatch sidestep the problem. I think that's a real problem for them, right? I think League of Legends is so far League of Legends is like tiptoeing around the line. I think Overwatch is a real problem where the characters are totally divorced from the gameplay in a way that is dissonant, which is why you have this cleaved fan base of one half that cares about the game and the other half that cares about the lore and the lore only. And it's a different problem than the Nathan Drake thing. I probably wouldn't today stand here and tell you that Uncharted has a little narrative dissonance problem, but I haven't really played that. I know that people felt that there was this sort of problem with the Tomb Raider reboots, where she is presented as an innocent, kind of girl who is has such a hard time, killing an animal, but then proceeds to put like 40 arrows into like bad guys, right, over and over. And so maybe there's more of it there. I see.
So yeah, the reason that I'm saying that it's protected against ludonarrative dissonance isn't because it is bereft of problems. It's because it doesn't qualify. This is a misdiagnosis of this patient does not have cancer, it has pneumonia, right? Overwatch has maybe ludo, I don't know, lore, but there isn't the narrative there. Do you know what I mean? It can't have ludonarrative dissonance if it doesn't have a narrative. Do you know what I mean?
I see. I think I think Overwatch has a narrative. It is just entirely divorced from the actual. Yeah, I guess this maybe is like
what I'm saying. If there's no narrative in the lore, how can it have a ludo? Well, the ludo and the narrative don't touch.
This is maybe an argument about what counts as Overwatch, right?
I guess that's fair.
Right, like if the cinematics are part of Overwatch, then I think there's a problem. If you want is League of Legends ludonarratively dissonant with Arcane, right? Because I think there's a bigger step of separation there, right? It is a Netflix show versus a game. There are all sorts of jokes online about if your friend watches Arcane and thinks that they should download League of Legends, don't let them, right? That kind of thing. Because
okay, yeah, but so at that point, I would say you're now talking about a level of media analysis that is franchise based. So sure. For instance, does the Batman comic have ludonarrative dissonance is a question that we would obviously say is no, because a comic cannot have a ludonarrative. There's no gameplay to a comic, but Batman, the property stretches into gameplay. So maybe you could say that actually Batman has ludonarrative dissonance and it's I would say that all of this is a category error of just if we're talking about ludonarrative, we have to be talking about the game itself. We have to be playing the game, and the fact that there is a superstructure of a franchise over top of it matters, and there can be problems in that. And I would absolutely agree that the cleft in the fan base with lore and gameplay all that stuff is sort of real, but it's not ludonarrative, because ludonarrative has to happen inside of the context of a game. Otherwise, we're misdiagnosing the issue. We can't talk about a ludonarrative problem if there is no ludo to the Overwatch cinematics on YouTube. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't know if I agree with 100%. Just because I do think that you import some maybe you're right. Maybe I'm trying to stretch the definition too hard, right? Because if there was a game called like, you know, Batman uh, ba- ba- Batman Sea Adventures, right? And it's about,
Mhm.
you know, a diver collecting coral specimens, and the character has bat ears on and is like Batman, right? Like, you know, and has nothing to do with Gotham City, nothing to do with crime, right? And isn't, you know, lamp shading it for like, you know, for comedic purposes. Like it is a serious kind of like, you know, claims to be a Batman game, but has nothing to do with Batman, right? Like you're importing the Batman context. You're like, this doesn't fit because it's not Batman, right? Like, um, and maybe you're right that calling that ludonarrative dissonance is a weird thing to put it, but the problem that you're pointing at is that the imported context of the things you know about Batman don't match your expectations, right? And that's obviously a very ridiculous example, but you could come up with like
Mhm.
more probably a more reasonable example. But basically, like a think of like a superhero game where the character like I hate to use this because we've been over it 1,000 times, but like a game where Batman acts like the Punisher, right? Like full out pulls out
Right.
an AK-47 and shoots people in the chest, and they have blood spatters, and they're definitely dead beyond any sort of recognition. And the game does not address the fact that this conflicts with what you expect Batman to be, right? Like, you know, you could narratively explain that away, but the game doesn't do that. Like that's a problem. Maybe you're right that we shouldn't call that ludonarrative dissonance, but I think that's imported via the narrative context that you get from Batman being a property in the common imagination, right? And we can argue about like the edges of this, right? Like, you know, where the kind of like people are being too hard line about like the accepted context. But I think there's a line that you could cross, right?
Yeah. So at this point, we are having the kind of semantic
Yeah,
argument
sure.
about what qualifies. Because I think we would both agree that this problem can exist, right? Absolutely.
Sure.
It is about whether or not ludonarrative dissonance is an accurate term for what's happening.
Sure.
Where my position is sort of no, because of like I just think that this thing can't define the thing, which is okay. Like,
Yeah. No, and you know, there is a I think there's a world where like, you know, story gameplay problem equals new ludonarrative distance is like a thing that, you know, maybe I'm doing it, maybe will happen regardless of what I do, because that seems like the, you know, flat terms kind of broaden and flatten as they get used. But
mhm.
yeah, and this is not strictly on topic. Actually, we're kind of a field.
you, you know what, we got places,
Yeah.
okay, who knows. I don't even, how do we, where do you
So
want to take it?
I do have a very minor note. You noticed that Deadlock is both the name of the gang and the name of
Mhm.
the gang in Overwatch, the name of the game from Valve. This Deadlock is a computer science term about like resolving concurrent threads, which is why and it sounds cool, and which is why I think you see these pop up a couple different places, even though, you know, they're otherwise.
Because everybody's computer scientists and you got to use the cool terms. That's absolutely
Well,
true. Fair
I
enough.
would say
Yep.
everybody writing the games is a computer scientist, right? Like, you know, um,
Hmm.
or a programmer, right? Like it's a programmer term, but yeah, but that's just more of a fun fact. But I think to get back to the main topic, something that you touched upon is that player expression can really only be done properly with an avatar protagonist, but I think the opposite isn't true, right? This is where you get your Master Chiefs and your World of Warcraft characters, and that um in terms of player expression in the story, right? You don't need like if you don't have any of that, you could still have an avatar character. Just feels kind of weird, right? Like or weird's maybe the wrong term, but it's a blank slate character without the expressive, like without story expressiveness, right? Which is
Yeah.
doable, but I don't think you could have an expressive authored character, if that makes sense. At least not with any sort of variety, right? Like you can get like
Okay. I think I can challenge that. Are you ready
okay,
for this? I
sure.
know I have one. It's Tav from Baldur's Gate. And the way they accomplished this was they created an incredible web where the game could support a truly limitless number of expression, like expressive actions, basically. Do you know what I mean? So for instance, the normal constraint on this is you can't have like for Master Chief or whatever, you have to deal with the fact that Master Chief is always going to fight the collectors. He's always going to do sort of whatever, right? Like there's no opportunity for you to do this sort of thinking outside the box thing. The only game I could possibly think of that solves this problem is Baldur's Gate, which truly, spent 3 years in early access solving for every possible version of you outthinking, laterally thinking the situation to create the story experience that I would consider to be expressive, right? The thing that makes it expressive in my mind is you can make yourself a villain, right? Which is impossible in Mass Effect. In Mass Effect, you have to do the, you like you can be an asshole if you want to be a renegade, but you're still going to be the asshole good guy who's going to solve the bad guy's problem. In Baldur's Gate, you can play the Dark Urge, which is more villainous than half of the villains that you end up fighting, because you were just like that sadistic and sort of sinister. And so I think this is a bit of a hot take, I guess. Maybe this is I don't know if other people would agree with me, but that would be my called shot here, because I've been thinking about this all day, or not all day, but since we started talking about this context is, how do I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 resolves into this?
So, did you finish Baldur's Gate? Okay. Just because, like, I feel like a lot of that expressiveness, like, that breadth of expressiveness falls apart once you get past Act 1, because Act 1's the only thing that spent 3 years in early access. I think Act 2 and Act 3 do not have nearly the breadth of options that Act 1 does. But that's more of a technical complaint than anything else. I see what you're saying, but I also think that, like, I think having one authored option, I don't know, to me that feels like it doesn't count, because, like, the vast majority of Baldur's Gate runs I would not describe as an authored protagonist. I describe them as avatar protagonists. Like, I don't like the character. Your character does not matter so much, right? Like, they are the fired gun, but they're not instrumental themselves in resolving the what's it called, the storyline so much. I think it's just like a kind of a natural limitation of games, right? Like, I think you can have an expressive authored protagonist in, like, a tabletop RPG, because you have the author sitting in front of you and they can, like, write the story for you, right in front of you. And I think Baldur's Gate is the closest we have gotten to that experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that, like, it is it still has these kind of, like, generic elements to it, to the character. And I think there's just like unless we have a, like, 10 years ago I would have told you it has to be like a game master sitting on the other side of the screen, and maybe you can get close to it with a properly tuned LLM in the next 5 years. That might be interesting, but, like, I just think we're talking about something that's, like, nearly impossible to do. I will grant you that Baldur's Gate 3 has gotten as close as anybody has so far.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of convinced by that in a way. Because in a certain sense, I would say the Dovahkiin also is sort of close to this, because the Dovahkiin, you have certain paths, like renegade. You're not renegade. What's the fucking Stormcloaks and Imperials, that kind of thing. That's like, if I'm calling some of this stuff in Baldur's Gate authored, I would have to call all that stuff authored, and I probably wouldn't. And so I think for those purposes, I probably agree. But I do think, yeah, Baldur's Gate, I don't know. This part of this is me wanting to give Baldur's Gate a little bit of an extra, an extra push, just because I happen to think that it's an exceptional game, and their ability to account for all of the different aspects of, what the players are going to do at any individual moment is pretty interesting, pretty compelling.
I agree. I'm excited to see what Larian does next.
Yeah, I mean, it's their like new divinity, not Divinity 3, but just they're calling it just Divinity or something.
You're calling it Divinity, and
Yeah.
Divinity 3 wouldn't be right. It'd be Divinity Original Sin 3, because the original game they made was called Divine Divinity, which was an action RPG in like the Diablo style.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
I played that game back in like middle or high school. For a
Okay.
brief while. Divine Divinity and Beyond Divinity, and then they made Divinity Original Sin and Divinity Original Sin 2 and Baldur's Gate, and now they're making Divinity. So they have relaunched this title for the third time. Hooray.
Hooray. Yeah.
Yeah. You have anything else you want to talk about on this? We're 50 minutes
No,
in.
I don't know. I feel like we covered it. I mentioned Baldur's Gate, which is where I was trying to go.
All right. Well, we've had 2 weeks. How have you been? What have you been up to?
I guess pretty great. Done a lot of stuff. Did I talk about Crusade? Did I talk about Warhammer last time? Or was that 2 weeks ago? Yeah, it's got to be. That was Tyrian's birthday, which I think was. What did we do last weekend? Did we fucking play Magic? I guess maybe there
We
was.
did the
Oh yeah, we
pre-release.
played Magic at your house. Yeah.
We played Magic. We played a commander. We played one commander game, a 6-person commander
Yeah,
game.
man, our commander games are so brutal. Do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about sort of 6-player command? We sort of thought about. We had this 6-hour, not 6 hours, 6-player commander game that just took forever.
And didn't even technically end, right? Like we were like, oh,
Yeah.
we'll do a free for all game. This will be quicker than something else, and it wasn't. And it was long, and it basically it was rolling towards the end, and like maybe one of us could have finished within a turn or two, but like effectively 3 of us had formed an alliance, and we wiped out the other 3 people at the table, and then we kind of declared joint victory because everybody else was ready to go home. So which is interest like, and we've been talking about how to fix this, and I think your answer is right, which is, triple 2-headed giant, right? Like,
Yeah, I just think you got to get people ticking. The funny thing was we also had played Commander the previous Thursday, and I was quietly timing turns because I just wanted to see. What it was like. I want to like diagnose this issue. I want to put it in a fucking spreadsheet and like really sort of like figure it out, because frankly I am accused of taking very long turns, but I don't think that that's true. I actually think I take pretty short turns given the number of game actions that I'm doing. If we're looking at game actions per minute, my turns are actually kind of short. But the problem is that they're pretty uninteractive because that's like the nature of a durdle, right? Durdling is when you're doing a bunch of stuff and it's all kind of happening, and I'm going through it really quickly because I'm trying not to suck up a bunch of people's time, but like nobody else is interacting with my board or sort of experience. The thing that takes the most time is combat, because you do this thing of, okay, I'm gonna attack with this guy. I'm gonna take this guy, send him. Frank, what do you have, blocker? Is that a it has death touch? Okay, I'm gonna send this one to Josh. You're doing that thing, and that takes 15 minutes, right? Because this was the crazy thing. I was like, this is a 15-minute turn, which is insane. But it was solely because of combat. It was a really, really big, complicated combat. And I don't think combat feels as bad as I don't think a combat feels as bad as a durdle, because combat is interactive. You are working with like another person to sort of like resolve a board state and all of the rest of it.
potentially the entire table, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly, right. Like this is also where a lot of like politicking kind of stuff happens. And so I was just really interested in that sort of. But the problem with the 6-player free-for-all game is you got to get multiple people playing turns at the same time. We kind of solved this with our Emperor game that we had played. But the construction, I guess I would say, of a game state where one person plays a turn at a time is real tough to get through, tough to sort of move through. And part of that is that you have to have this like grand understanding of sort of the board and board state. So something that I had pitched was wheel or neighbors, right? Wheel is everybody can only attack to their left, and so you're defending from the right, attacking to the left, and the idea is, you get people Pac-Man glomming up. You don't have to have a deep and complex understanding of the entirety of the board state. You simplify combat a whole lot. I was thinking about it because I did that thing where I timed it. I saw that combat was what was most sort of incredible. When combat is just 1v1 faster, right? And then you can just boop, 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 boop. You can go around the circle, and I don't really have to pay all that much attention to what's happening on the side of the table, because really the operative thing is I need to kill this person sort of right in front of me. Though also at the same time, there's sort of an expectation that, okay, once I kill that person, I then pop into the person after that's board state, and if they are, you know, extremely defensive, I might be in sort of like an kind of position. Who knows, right? Um, and then neighbors is you can only attack neighbors is like wheel, but you can go both directions, so you can tack to the left, you can tack to the right, but you can't attack across the table. We used to do neighbors all the time when I was a kid, but I also just think that games were so simple back then. You know, there's just like a lot less rules text on a fucking, you know, literally 0 rules text on a Vizardrix, right? Somebody lays a Vizardrix and it is coming at you. You chump it for 2 turns, and then it starts chunking 6, you know, out of your life total until you fucking lose, right? Like that was how games went when we were kids. And now it is just much harder to make that sort of happen. And then anyway, and then the third version of this was 3 you know, 2v2v2, so 3-person 2-headed giant, which is interesting because I immediately got in the car with Rachel and we spent the entire ride back to Concord just theorizing what would be really interesting 2v2, you know, like 2-man teams. If me and Rachel were gonna be a block, gonna be a 2-headed giant, what should we run together? What would be best? Do you want something that synergizes? Do you want 2 things that have a very similar game plan? Like something I was talking about was, if you're gonna run aggro, it feels like you should run both teams aggro, right? Because you're attacking into a full board no matter what. So if I'm gonna play an aggro deck, I need you also to be aggro with me, so that we are going 2 persons aggressive boards against 2 people's defensive boards, right? Otherwise, what you're doing is you're having the aggro player go, you know, 1v2, which is never gonna, you're always gonna trade down in that sort of scenario. But also at the same time, you know, you can do the opposite of that, which is you want contrasting game plans so that you can account for better things. One of the things that Rachel and I were talking about was somebody should run a creature-based deck and somebody should run an artifact-based deck, because you won't be hosed by the same board wipes. If somebody overloads a Vandal Blast, the artifact player is really going to hurt, but at least the creatures, Takasia is fine. Takasia is not really going to get hurt by an overloaded Vandal Blast, right? But if somebody uses Wrath of God, okay, now Takasia is owned, but this, you know, whatever, this artifacts deck is completely sort of fine. And I think the tactics and strategy in that are interesting. I don't really know. I think those are also a good option. But it, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, my thoughts are here is that like basically any of these alternate formats kills politics, right? Because you can't.
Yeah,
it is hard. Like essentially at the point where you solve the 4-player format, the 4-player free for all format makes politics possible, like 4 and up. And I think if you subdivide it at any point, like it basically kills the politics, which is I think integral to the format to make it feel right. It doesn't mean that you can't have fun doing other things.
In Wheel, you have an opponent. It is assigned by the game mechanic. You cannot politics your way out of it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you could with certain rules. So for instance, one of the things I was thinking about when I was talking about sort of like Wheel and neighbors is, does a Wrath hit the whole board or only your neighbors, right? If I hit Wrath, do I get the 3 of us or do I get the 6 of us, right? Can I path somebody across the board for me? Can I still see their game state, or do I only have a, you know, field of vision, whatever it's called, in a zone of control or whatever, like in Emperor of One. There's a little bit of politics there, but really kind of not much. And I would probably agree with you that it really hampers the politics of the board.
Yeah, like maybe you could do like a Zone of Influence 2 game for like 6 and 7 person games, which means that like people on the opposite sides of the table can take turns simultaneously. Although I do think that exiting from the simultaneous turns is tough without like making somebody feel like they're getting the shit end of the stick. But but the other thing too, like the immediate problem I could see with twin two-headed or 3-player two-headed giant, or 3-team two-headed giant, which I think would be fun. I think we should try just to see if this is accurate. But my imagination is, or my gut is telling me that the dominant strategy that emerges is like one very defensive player and one player that is playing for an alt win con, right? Like somebody runs like Doran and just puts big monsters on the board and keeps everything, or one person plays
it would be Takasia plus, I don't know, what's another good
Augustin, right? Like somebody who can
exactly,
somebody who could lock everything down while Takasia digs for approach with the second
I'd approach the second sun win. Absolutely. I think that would probably be true.
Yeah. Which is like it is interesting to me how much, like, I think part of the problem is that like these alt win cons feel okay at 4 players, but like their value goes up the more players you add, right? Like, the more people you are playing against, the more valuable a win from playing solitaire is.
Yeah, I mean, this is why Thassa's Oracle is so powerful,
right.
Which is funny because I almost put Thassa's Takasia deck just because I was like, well, it's a little creature, you can put it out, it'll surveil a little bit. The Thassa's Oracle has the win the game text, but actually it comes into play and it draws you a card, which is nice. But also Takasia mills the library, and then I could Thoracle at the end of the so I'm not doing the true 2-card combo of like Demonic Consultation, Thassa's Oracle, but it was just wild to think about putting a crazy, the most powerful win condition in Commander into a deck that can't cast the other half of that extremely powerful combo. But I absolutely agree with you. I think the value of that stuff goes up. I also think board wipes go up way hard, because if you think about like the math of a board wipe, a Wrath of God is good in 4-player because you are going like 6 or 7 for 1. So yesterday when we were playing, I was playing Ketramos. Ketramos is a really hardcore black-white control deck, right? The goal of that deck is to run everybody out of resources, Wrath like 2-3 times, right? In order to really lock people out of the game, and I was able to do that. But then we kind of got to this position where it was just like, boy, I had an incredible engine online. I had gained a lot of life. I was at like 70 or something life. I don't think anybody was really in a position to kind of kill me, but are we really going to go around the table 3 more times for me to get like enough commander damage on for the win, sort of thing? Like that that is a brutal way to go. But like in a 6-player game, Wrath of God just goes up in value because now you're crushing 6 people's worth of creatures, not just 4 or 3, kind of, because hypothetically you're not trying to wrath your own board, sort of thing. And I think that's another reason. One of the reasons that we got really hosed in that 6-player game at your house was we just had a lot of board wipes. We board wiped like 4 times, and because you have 6 people, we're all drawing a certain number of these. And it means that people just have them in their hands. And so Josh casts Ultima, I cast Black Sun Zenith, whoever, casted Austere Command, you casted Austere Command. It was just like there's a lot of board wiping going on, which stops people from sort of assembling the big kind of engines. I also think that people really hate Approach the Second Sun, even though in my mind, I frankly don't think it's all that different than a Craterhoof Behemoth. I had this argument with Sarian where I sort of said the simple way for me to build Takasia is to go very wide, and then I dig for Craterhoof Behemoth, and then I land a Craterhoof Behemoth and attack for the win. And he said, please do that. I would like it so much more than Approach the Second Sun. And I was just like, frankly, Approach the Second Sun is a worse win condition than Craterhoof Behemoth, because you don't have to cast it twice and do the digging. But I'm never going to get on to the other side of that issue, I think.
I think if I had to put my finger on it, I think the issue with Approach of the Second Sun is that it feels unreactable, right? Like it feels like it would be very hard for you to assemble a wide board and throw Craterhoof Behemoth all at once, right? Like, it feels like Approach of the Second Sun. I think maybe the answer is we don't run enough counter spells, right? Like,
well, yeah, but this is also the thing. Takasia needs to run the wide board. The Approach to the Second Sun victory only works, okay, if I have 6 creatures in play, a draw spell, or a draw engine, 15 mana, right? And so at that point, you've got Takasia, 5 other creatures, a creature that will tap to draw me a card, right? And then 15 mana. I feel like it's fair for me to have assembled a
You,
win, to use that to
you,
assemble
you
a
know
win.
what? You know what the actual issue is now that you've laid that out? Is the legibility of
What?
Takasia. I don't think any of us actually knows exactly how Takasia works, right? And so, like, you know, you say
Yeah,
it's like,
I
oh, you are
definitely
right.
think that's fair.
I can keep you from approaching the second sun by killing the creatures that you're using to survey it down. That makes total sense to me, but that's not very legible to someone sitting there. You're just kind of like, you know, okay, buddy's dirtling again, and then he says he wins, right? Like, you know.
I do think that happens. I do think that people just tune out, and because I'm not doing all that much attacking or whatever, and this is what makes Craterhoof Behemoth. If I had Craterhoof Behemoth in that deck, right, and I had that exact same board state, I would be able to lay with 15 mana. Are you kidding me? I'd be able to lay 3 more creatures, right? We would go up to 10. You lay the Craterhoof Behemoth, that's 11. I'm now hitting my whole board with 121 extra power and toughness and trample and haste, and then of course I can swing out and kill the whole, I can one shot the whole table from full health, right? And this is what is crazy to me about it, right? Like that is the fairer win. I think that's the simpler win. I think that's less interesting or kind of impressive, right, than assembling the approach the second sun win. But it's the thing that generates more fuss. It's kind of like mill, you know, like mill I don't think is a very good strategy, but like people get really mad when you mill stuff into their graveyard, and it's because they don't quite understand the nature of the probability of, I'm not depriving you of a card, I'm not depriving you of the draw. It's just that the random number generator has been a little altered, right? That it is the state of your deck, and people don't have a great understanding of the nature of that random number generation. And so it is the kind of thing that generates more saltiness than like it is actually good.
Yeah, and I also think a big part of this, honestly, is also that this is probably gonna be a steaming hot take, but I think playing with more than 4 people is just suboptimal, right? Like I just like
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and we have the problem is we have exactly the wrong number of friends, right? Like if we
Yeah,
had
we keep getting into these like 7-player games. It's like, okay, well, how do we get everybody to play together, right?
yeah, it's like we need 8 people, right? Because then we could do 2 sub pods, right? Or we need like, you know, 6. Like I think 5 is doable. Like I think the answer to 7 might be a 4-person pod and a 3-person pod, right? Like that might be the actual answer.
Yeah.
Um,
I would be really interested in I would be, yeah, I think that's probably right. I also have a whole thing about like um I think the 6-player game, uh even if it moves at a good clip, is always going to go long. If you think
yeah.
about it, in a 4-player game, everybody takes it's sort of like the tweet or whatever. Did you read this tweet about $8 is $5? Do you know what I'm talking about? There's this tweet from the developer of Peak who was like, well, when we were looking at pricing it, we wanted to make it feel like it was cheap. So if you charge it at $3, that feels like $5. But if you charge it at $6, that also feels like $5. $7 also feels like $5. 8 feels like $5, but 9 feels like $10. And then 10 and 11, those feel like $10, but 12 feels like $15. And he was like going through this thing or whatever. I actually think this is also true for sort of like time duration, right? In a 4-player game, everybody takes a 5-minute turn. That's a 20-minute turn rotation. That feels like 15 minutes. In a 6-player game, everybody takes a 5-minute turn. That's 30-minute turn rotation. That feels like 30 minutes. You know what I mean? And that's brutal, right? Like,
yeah, no, you're absolutely correct.
mm-hmm.
Basically, we need to have less friends.
We need to have less friends. Yeah. I also think that part of it is that a lot of time we're playing new decks and stuff like that. You know, I feel like people need to get a better like understanding and sort of like handle on their deck. One of the things that was funny was I was talking to Josh when we were driving down to wherever we were driving down. We were, because it was yesterday. We were going to like TJ's or whatever. And I realized that Josh had like he has like 16 different decks, but we're about to put in a big proxy order to get like 3 or 4 more. And at a certain point, what we're doing is we're spreading out the number of decks that we play and losing mastery in kind of each of them. One of the things that I've been listening to this CEDH podcast called Play to Win. Mostly because I need something to do. I just need a podcast to listen to in work sometimes, and they talk very fast and have a kind of great little clip that it's like ASMR. But one of the things that they've talked about is they only ever have two CDH decks at a time because they never want to lose the like muscle memory for piloting it. Which I actually think is pretty interesting, right? Could you imagine a world where like each of us was only playing one of two decks, right? I kind of can't, because so much of what we're doing is this expressive thing of, hey, I've showed up to a new deck at the table. I'm playing Ketramos and I built it as board wipe fucking tribal. Let's go, right? But I just want to Ketramos today. That means I'm going to take him out of my thing. I'm put something else in. We're gonna be getting these proxies. I'm just gonna go back to aggressive decks or whatever. When was the last time I played Eureka? I played Eureka at my house on Thursday, which is probably the first time I've touched Eureka in maybe like 6 or 7 months. So it's like that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, no, I agree, and yeah, it's funny because I feel like you need to like play them right. Like the deck I've played the most probably over the past 6 months is Jeff, but Jeff isn't like a mastery deck, right? Like Jeff is like it's like a chaos deck, and he's fun, right? Like, and I love playing Jeff every once in a while.
I want you to know, when we went to TJ's, somebody was playing Jeff.
Was he playing? Was he playing like I played Jeff?
Yeah, he laid Hive Mind. He said, "Okay, I'm gonna cast a spell called Hive Mind. Do you guys know what Hive Mind is?" And I was sitting there, I was listening. Oh my god! Just great. I was happy about that. Ah, so funny.
uh, but
Is
yeah,
there any other way to play Jeff?
yeah, that's fair. I think there's like a real way to play Jeff, which is just kind of like you could play as like a steal spells kind of deck, right? And like fill it with that effects and just like kind of like play it to win as opposed to like play it to like cause so chaos. But
Mhm.
to your point, like there are like if you put a gun to my head and told me pick like 3 decks and we'll exclude Jeff just because he's not a deck I choose because I want to win, but like I would probably pick Preston, Rango, and what would I pick for a third one? Maybe AC, just because like I've played AC or just because like they're like the archetype. Like I think Rango is a more fun version of Sauron, right? For me, it's actually very different, but like it is a the Sauron feels very one trick to me, right? You steal people's stuff and then you sacrifice it, but like it's not like you get a real game. Like you can get stuff going with Rango, which I like. And I would like, and so like I think you need to play like Yurlock I enjoy, but I play him because he's fast, but I also don't feel like there's a thing for me to like do there, right? Like it's kind of like I end up like giving everybody a ton of mana and dying, right? Because that like this is like how that's like what your luck is designed to do, right? Is to like pump a bunch of mana, make everybody aggravated at you, and eventually flame out, but actually cause the game to resolve in a relatively short period of time, right? Like it's more of an accelerant deck than a deck that I enjoy playing enough that I'd want to like put a ton of mastery into. I, on the other hand, really enjoy playing Preston, even though he's like very simple, right? Like it's like make a ton of fucking rabbits, you whore, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing that I feel like you're maybe identifying here is the what is it? There's the distraction makers circle in a way of like economy, speed, and defense. I guess you don't really have a defense deck in there. But I totally understand playing AC is just like power. This is my battle cruiser. I'm gonna build a huge, fleet kind of thing. Then I guess I was thinking about interaction. Like the Rango deck is interactive, right?
right.
It's a deck that wants to just like pull stuff. Maybe it would be for me. It would be like Eureka, Takasia, and Taval or something like that, or like Lord Windgrace, right? Like one of these is my aggro deck. That's Eureka. One of these is my defense deck. That's Takasia. One of these is my like power deck, my economy deck, and that's going to be like Lord Windgrace or some engine based deck.
Yeah. No, I like started specking out a Brigid Kithkin deck since I pulled that from the pre-release. And I got like halfway through and was like, what am I doing? I am not going to enjoy playing this. And I put it like I don't know what I like, I have
I put that in Takesha actually. Because it's a tapping untapped deck, oh my god, you go wide all the time. Brigand now just taps you for a million extra green white mana. Fucking for real, let's go. Intruder alarm that, please.
No, absolutely. And like that makes sense to me, but I was like, I pulled this, I should make it a and I went 6-0 in the pre-release actually, so I had like a ton of fun with this. Like,
yeah. So what did you? I'm actually really interested in that. How did you go 6-0? You won the pre-release. Nobody else had a better record.
I think somebody else had the same record, but had their opponents had a better win record, and so I think I was technically second.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because Alex told us that you won the pre-release.
Yeah, well, maybe I was looking at the rankings on the app, so maybe I did. But basically, I had a kind of 2-half strategy, which was I had Kithkin wide for the early game, and then I had Doran and kind of like Tree Folk for the later game to kind of close things out. And I usually ended up closing out with I got a couple of quick closeouts or a couple of neat closeouts with it's a Kithkin called like Faded Creature, Creature of Fable, something like that. And it's
Figure of Fable, yes, or whatever. Figure of the that one wrecked my ass. I was just like, what do I fucking do against this thing?
But what you do is you don't let it get to its third stage, right? Like, because
yep. I literally did not have removal for it. I was like, well, I guess I just die on your turn because you attacked me for 8 twice and I can't interact with it anymore. Like,
yeah. So like that helped, and then like Doran helped a couple times, and there's a couple of Tree Folk in there. Like there's the one that's like it comes in with 2/2 counters on it, -1/-1 counters on it, and you pull 2 off to I think pull something out of the graveyard and onto the battlefield. Mm-hmm. It is like there were just like enough and like there's also a it's like Sun Dappled something, which is like a 2/5 vigilance with Convoke. And if you're playing Kithkin, it's like, oh, I have like 5 1/1s. I will tap them and play this. I had 2 of them in my deck. I will play these and just like have these walls that you have to deal with every turn. And there were a couple that were very close, but I just managed to kind of clutch it out. I felt kind of bad because one of my wins was like the opponent not realizing that that Figure of Fable meant like protection from players means that like the creatures also can't block it, right? He thought he'd be able to chump it, he just wouldn't be able to do anything to it. It's like, I'm sorry, man, but
that's not how it works. Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah.
But so you started specking out a Brigand deck, and it was just like, this is not my style. Why would I ever play this?
Because like I enjoyed both of them, and so I built a Doran deck in theory, and I built I started building a Brigand deck. It's like I actually only enjoy this in kind of like the kind of both halves of the plan thing. And I actually don't think I'd actually enjoy playing Brigand on her own. And I also don't think that the wide at the bottom, tall at the top thing works in a 100 card format where Doran's going to be the only guaranteed card. So
yeah, Brigand is just like, that's just a Craterhoof deck. I sort of, it's funny because we've been talking about this because Syrian's building an elf ball. He's building an elf deck or whatever. And elf ball is the kind of thing that I think I denigrate a little bit, which is probably a character flaw on my part, right? Part of what makes me like the Takesha approach the second sun is that this was like a win condition that I crafted out of, oh, hey, if I'm building a deck and the deck wants to go wide, but I'm not really attacking, but I can get a bunch of lands into play, which is my plan with a couple of these, lands from the graveyard cards, then what I can do is lock in and approach the second sun victory by doing, but that, right? Approach the second sun is not in very many Takesha decks. But Elf Ball, like, it's maybe the second or third most popular tribal deck, because I think vampires is number one. It's maybe the second or third most popular, tribal deck. It is called Elf Ball because once it gets rolling, you either board wipe it and stop it, or you die, right? Like you just kind of like lose. And this is the kind of deck I would just never want. I feel like, right? It is the exact same thing of just the interest that I have, or like Krenko would be another good example of this, like a Goblins Krenko deck. Josh has one which is good, and it wins, and I totally get it. I totally see what is fun about piloting, like Krenko, I'm sure, but just it's like not for me. If I want to build a Goblins deck, I feel like I'm gonna have to go find some weird ass commander to make like maybe you do like black red goblins aristocrats or something, make a bunch of one, sacrifice them all or something stupid like that. I don't know. At this point in my like deck building, I'm looking for orthogonal sort of gameplay strategies, which I think is good because it stops me from just playing the most powerful things, like definitionally. Playing Yuriko as ninja tribal is not the way. I mean, there are a number of ninjas in the normal sort of the deck, but mostly you're doing this top deck manipulation thing where you just blitzing people for like 13, damage and stuff like that. And I kind of feel like my interest as a deck builder now is in doing weird shit and showing off like weird builds. I have a Flubs the Fool deck. Flubs is normally played as a landfall character, but I'm building it for Dragon's Approach because I just fucking think that's neat,
Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough. And I've got like 4 or 5 decks that I want to put together, which is probably unwise, but I might do it. I might hold off.
I feel like I want to do the Commando did this where they go through and they talk about each individual deck. And I feel like I want to do that with our decks. I think that would be like a fun sort of exercise where, you get to answer a couple of key questions like what are the most important cards in the deck? And you have 3 cards. This what what are the hidden gems, the things that nobody would recognize as like linchpin kind of like key cards sort of thing. I feel like that would be like interesting to do sometime.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Mostly because a lot of my decks don't kind of like fit that, right. It's just kind of like it's
Really?
well, most of my decks are like very commander centric, right? Like
Oh, I see. The linchpin is the commander.
yeah. And like I could tell you that the linchpin for Preston is heir apparent. There's 40 of them or whatever, right? But like and maybe that's why it's the most successful. Like I think I'm going to retire what's the name of it?
Sauron?
Sorry?
Sauron?
No.
Or whatever it is now.
I think I'm going to retire the Final Fantasy deck I put together. Ragnarok.
Oh yeah. Oh, I see. You did the thing. Listen, you did the thing. Okay.
I did the thing, and I was doing the thing to do the thing, but like, it's just kind of like, Ragnarok stapled on top of kind of generic Grixis, and like, I don't see a way where I would make it interesting in a way that I'd want to play it again, right? Like,
yeah, I get that. One of the things they were talking about in the EDH podcast was good stuff versus synergy. Like, do you play a deck that is good stuff, which is just the best cards in your colors, right? Or do you play synergy, for cards that synergize with one another to get better? I obviously think synergy is more fun and interesting, and so I feel like I build my decks towards synergy. But there's definitely that feeling of good stuff that I have, which is like, oh, I want rampant growth in 8 of my decks because at 2 mana, I want to ramp to my 4 mana commander. So that's how it's going, right? I'm gonna put Thought Vessel, Mind Stone, all the signets for my colors in every single deck because I want a 2 mana rock. I don't want a 3 mana rock, right? Like those kinds of things. And I feel myself, getting pulled in those kinds of directions from time to time.
yeah, I definitely feel that. I like what the deck I enjoy Stiltskin because it's fun and like like it's weird stuff like that definitely hits that weird stuff for me, kind of deal.
Yeah, I felt that way about Bumbleflower for sure, right? Because because it is so interactive. Giving people cards, all the time, I think is really great. You're like, Bumbleflower is sort of like, I don't know. It's very about managing the politics of the board in the same way that Stiltskin is, which I think is neat. Even though Stiltskin has this like brutal thing of, and then I give you an enchantment and you fucking die.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I want to make, I have like a spec out and I want to go over it again. I was sitting here because you're talking about like putting in a proxy order. It's like, I think I might just, wait and do my own thing because I want to make sure I have these all dialed in the way I want to. Because I want to do an IRO team master as more of like a real, like Stiltskin is not really group hug. Stiltskin is like pillow fort and then like pass out instant lose conditions, which is, interesting and mean, but it works based on the fact that Stiltskin is a one or a 2 mana commander, and like if you kill him 2 times, it won't be prohibitive for me to cast him again. Whereas I want to play Iroh more like a real kind of like group huggy politicsy commander, whereas like I am not going to give away things that are bad for you. I'm going to give away things that will actually have value to the person I give it away from. And maybe that's just a matter of kind of like, picking and choosing what I'm giving away nicely, right? And playing him otherwise as a red-white alley deck, which is kind of his other thing.
I think that's actually really clever and compelling. One of the things that I've really felt about our Commander games in particular is that we're actually weirdly bloodthirsty, which is that when I do threat assessment, normally what you're supposed to do is everybody at the table, you do the 3v1 thing, right? 3v1 shifting arch enemy, and everybody is kind of ganging up on that person, right? So if you are the person who is in ahead, everybody is attacking you every turn, and it really like forces your board down, that kind of thing. But what tends to actually happen is the opposite of that. When somebody has a really strong board state, everybody gets really sheepish, and you just hammer the person that's already in last, right? Like the person who is like getting owned just continually gets more owned because they don't have the blockers in the first place, right? And so and I want my commander to connect and to get my combat damage trigger, so of course I'm going to fucking send it. Oh, you don't have any flyers? I have 15 in the air coming at you. Like that kind of happens in our group. And so I like the idea of a politics deck that is built around helping out the little guy. Like the kind of thing where you go, hey, listen, I just played a 6/6 dragon and I can pass it to you because you're in last, you're struggling, you need a thing, just do me a favor, let's just make a deal. This thing is goated against me. Like you just never attack me with. And somebody probably takes that deal if they're in last place, right? And you can do that with something like Iroh, which I think is really compelling. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I wanna put that together. I also wanna, there's like there's always 100 decks to do, but I want to play Rango more, right? Like this is the thing is like when we played at my place last week, I was like, oh, I'll play Preston and then I'll play Rango, right? Because Preston will be quick, and then Preston was not quick, right? Like, I never got to play Rango. But I think maybe that's the theme for the next little while is like deep rather than wide on the commanders.
I think that's probably clever. I'm really excited for my Swords tribal deck, which has come from the idea of what if I put every sort of X and Y in one deck. And which is I was actually the real reason this came up is because I was thinking about doing, I was like, it would be a really neat birthday present to give somebody like an altar commander that is themed after their WoW characters. So my first thought for this was Sarian because it was his birthday 2 weeks ago. And I found like an undead warlord, kind of character. I was like, oh, this would be perfect for Karif, his Forsaken Warrior kind of character or whatever. And then as I was thinking about these, I eventually thought to myself, what would it look like for me to do a Tonrik? And I was like, oh my God, it would be an equipment deck and it would be all swords. And then I thought to myself, what if I put every sort of X and Y, the like sort of body and mind, 3 mana, 2 mana equip, protection from blue, and it has a combat damage trigger or whatever. I was like, what would it look like to just put there are 11 of them and you put all of them in a deck together? And so now we're gonna see. This is a very also anti kind of my style of play because like I think of myself as fundamentally a kind of value control player, not really an aggressive player. Even my aggro archetype, which is Yuriko, is like very value oriented in the sense that I'm drawing a ton of cards, sort of thing. And so playing in Boros colors with no real good card draw is going to probably suck. But who knows? Maybe it's going to be really funny to put 6 swords on a person and then,
What's your commander?
attack. Nahiri Forged by Fury. Um, she's it's a 6-mana commander, but it's with affinity for equipment, which I also quite like. You can just keep bringing Nahiri out for 2 mana, kind of in the Eureka way, because if you just have a lot of equipment out, you will be able to pull it out of the yard. She basically says, whenever you, I think it's connect. Hold on, I can look it up really quick. Oh, it's whenever an equipped creature I control attacks, you exile the top card of your library and you play that card the turn. But if it's an equipment, you just play it for free, right? It just comes into play, kind of thing. So it is that. It's also not very Voltron-y, which is the thing I really wanted to. It is built to have a number of good creatures that can like wear the equipment and get suited up, but it is not a I am going to, equip Nahiri and she is going to run the swords down the end. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of games where she will wear a sword and sort of win. But it's actually pretty creature dense for an equipment deck. Most equipment decks are very creature light because the idea is you just put all your equipment on your commander list.
Okay, because Card Market put out a video with like budget commander decks, and one of them was Valduk, Keeper of the Flame, which is like at the beginning of comment on your turn for each or an equipment attached to Valduk, Keeper of the Flame, create a 3/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste, and that feels like it'd be a fun one to do with that. Like, just put all the swords on Valduk, and then like elementals, right? Like,
That's true. I'm just excited to see if the swords work. The part of it is that I've been thinking a lot about classic. I went back and I started watching old episodes of Shuffle Up and Play, which is the Tolarian Community College like gameplay show, and old episodes of Command Zone, and I am deeply nostalgic for that level of Commander again. Like the version of Commander where I was getting to turns. It's funny because we would play. I described this the other day. What's fun about that? It feels like it would take forever. Nobody ever would. It's like you say that, but in the old days, you would have you would have a game go to turn 13. Somebody, like exsanguinates twice in a row to burn the whole table out, and we all go, "Wow, good game!" And that whole game only took 45 minutes, and it's because the games were really simple. It was like there were just less things happening. You didn't build these really explosive boards very quickly. There were so many fewer triggers to worry about. I just think about the number of triggers that are in so many decks these days. You just don't do any of that stuff in kind of these like old commander decks. And one of the things that was extremely good in Commander were the Swords of X and Y. Sword of Feast and Famine was the one that had come out when I was playing, which I had in my Rexiel deck. It was one of the big ways that I could win with Rexiel is you suit up Rexiel with a Sword of Feast and Famine, and you get Sword of Feast and Famine untaps all of your lands when it connects. And Rexiel himself has Island Walk and Swamp Walk, so it was pretty easy to connect with somebody on Rexiel. But now I think Sword of Feast and Famine is probably bad. I just don't think it's going to be in a lot of decks because 3 mana to play it, 2 mana to equip is just a lot of money to pay for an effect that you're going to get kind of like once or twice because the game ends on turn 6. I don't know. Anyway, that's just what I've been thinking about when it comes to stuff.
Fair enough. The only thing I think I have to talk about is we finished Avatar: The Last Airbender.
What'd you think? We can do a whole episode actually. I think, and probably we could or should. Maybe I should start watching it again because I haven't watched it in a while. But what did you think?
Top level, it's great. I've got some like. Was the last 4 episodes ever a movie? Because it feels like it was.
Yeah, it was released as a movie.
Okay, that like,
it was 4 episodes that were released in a giant 2-hour block.
Yeah,
they actually did that with also Day of the Black Sun. That was I think that was 1 2-hour block.
There were a couple of 2-episode, like, so on Netflix they play as one, like, the last 4 episodes play as 1 episode, but they're chapter titles. in them. Um, and there were a couple that played as two, but the last 4 episodes feels like a movie that was meant to be released in theaters, and it did this kind of like half step thing where it feels like maybe it was also meant for people who hadn't seen any of the rest of Avatar. Um, which I think like it has some of those kind of like, you ever watch like a movie for a TV show and the characters feel a little bit slightly out of place because like they're like maybe a slightly earlier version of the character, or like they're a they don't have quite as much growth as they have in the show, because you need to also have them, you can't have them be like partway along their journey, because people coming into it fresh need to be able to see it. It didn't feel terrible like that in the Avatar. Do you know what I'm talking about? This it happens a lot with anime movies.
Okay, yeah, I think I feel like I'm following, but sure. So sure.
Yeah. So I don't think the last 4 episodes of Avatar were that bad, but there were some things there that I felt a little off. I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was very good. I thought it was a lot of fun, um, and I enjoyed it very much. But I also thought that it felt there were some specific things that I took issue with. But I will save that for a full episode discussion. But I thought it was great, but not perfect. Is the way I will summarize it.
Okay. Well, that's really compelling. I definitely I don't know, I'm finishing up on Bob's Burgers, so maybe I will just start watching Avatar. I have been playing a lot of Avatar cards because of have I talked about the Jumpstart packs thing that Rachel and I are
Yeah.
doing?
Oh, well, I don't know if you talked about it on
Yeah.
the podcast. Talk about it.
Yeah, so on the podcast, something that I did was I bought a booster box of Jumpstart, which is like a version of Magic that you use to like introduce people to the game. And the idea is you buy 2 packs, you shuffle them together, and that's a 40 card deck. It comes with a bunch of lands and stuff like that. And the reason I thought about it was I was like, oh, this would be a really great thing when Rachel and I go to dinner. We can just take 4 packs and while we're waiting for our food to arrive, we can play this short 10-minute game of Magic. It's a little bit limited, it's a bit like it's a limited format sort of thing. And then also just, I don't know, whatever. But playing those games has put the Avatar cards in my sort of mindset, and it also has just given me a bunch of them. So I just keep adding them to my decks as I like rip open packs and find new Jumpstart cards. I'm just like, oh, this would be great in whatever, Eureka, right? Like the Blue Spirit is actually a great example of this. The Blue Spirit says, whenever a creature enters the battlefield during combat, you may draw a card. I was like, that's perfect for Eureka. This is like every ninja draw that enters during combat is a draw engine kind of thing, which is really um so I've been doing that. And I don't know. It's just made me think a lot about Avatar recently. I was thinking about making a Zuko. One of the decks I wanted to Zuko Conflicted, which is sort of the the Zuko card that they made for um uh book 2. Where he's having a real hard time. And Zuko Conflicted is a really bad card a commander, but I just think it would be neat because he exiles himself and then he comes into play under an opponent's control. Like every combat, you choose one. Is you add a red. He gets a +1/+1 counter. You exile the top card of your library. The last one is you exile Zuko and he comes into play. He betrays you. But I just think that's kind of neat, and so I think I might make a deck around it. So yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking about Avatar these days, I guess.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
What's your plan for Korra? Are you guys gonna watch Korra?
It is not on the immediate. So the way we do this is, we alternate television seasons. Caroline picks a season, then I pick a season, and Avatar were her seasons. My understanding is that it is not her next pick for her season. So,
Okay.
we will see.
What is your next pick?
So we are currently watching season 2 of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Oh, okay.
Which is a show I watched in bits and pieces over our friend Barry's shoulder while we were in college, but never watched all the way through, so wanted to do that.
I have also never watched it all the way through. I do know that it was Barry's favorite show. So
yeah. And then also I wanted to watch Tengu Toppan Gurren Lagann, which is a single season show, but Caroline dislikes it so much that the deal we have reached is that we watch 2 episodes of it at the beginning of each of my seasons instead of making her sit through the whole thing. So,
fair enough.
We are still not through the end of the Beast Monarch. So, yeah, that and yeah, but yeah, that's basically it. Otherwise, I've just been playing Arc Raiders, as you might expect. Also, Monster Train 2, which is a game I got recommended from a podcast from what's the name of it? From the Season Gaming Bitcast. It's a what's it called? Game Pass game. It's like a turn. It's like it's not quite Slay the Spire. It's like half Slay the Spire, half Auto Battler, which is maybe a little too much. But like you play units, you play cards. The cards are like equipment and spells and stuff that you put on your units, and then a turn passes and you fight the monsters. The kind of story is that I think the story of the first game was that there's a pact between heaven and hell, and or maybe it was the pact had broken down and then heaven was driving into hell. But anyway, the game opens in 2 is that heaven and hell have made this pact because a rogue angel has invited the Titans, like the Greek Titans, into heaven, and they are taking over. And so the heaven and hell have combined to take down the Titans and stop the kind of end of the world. And they are doing this by driving a train powered by a soul crystal of some sort to get there, I guess. And the interesting part is that you don't just directly, like, the units fight each other, but the enemy units are not necessarily trying to kill your stuff. They are trying to get to the top of the train and beat down your crystal, right? So they advance the floor every turn if you don't kill them. And so you have to kill them before they get to the top. Like the top's kind of like your tower. It's like kind of like tower defense, turn based in a way.
Okay.
But it's also kind of got that it's like one of these, basically you know exactly what your opponents are going to do every turn. There's no surprises other than like the monsters entering the train, which don't attack on their first turn. And so you know what the outcome of each turn is when you hit the end turn button. And so it's about building combos, right? Like any other sort of roguelite. It's a roguelite too, because of course it is. To take down these enemies and kill a bunch of stuff and get to the end of the track. So I have beaten one run. I've unlocked, I think, most of the factions. This is just this is the game that I replaced the Bazaar with. Like my kind of like,
okay,
time waster game.
Yeah, I get that because I've been playing a lot of Hearthstone Battlegrounds, which is that version of the game. I am very bad at Hearthstone Battlegrounds this season. My goal last season was 7K, and I'm at like 6.25, and I basically got to 6K, which is like the floor at the beginning of the season, and I just really don't get anywhere after that. But it makes my brain juice flow, so is what it is.
Fair enough. Yeah, well, anything else you want to talk about?
I guess that's about that.
Great. Well, if you'd like to email us about any things we talked about in this podcast, this is derpsgames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsgames.com. You can follow us on twitch.tv/derpsgames, youtube.com/derpsgames, where these go out live. Rate reviews wherever you find podcasts. All links will be down in the description. Buddy, do you have anything you're looking to promote?
What am I going to promote? Dead Pets comes out this week. Dead Pets comes out on Friday. So that.
Oh, Ryan heard you. I see him. All right, with that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.